So here's one of the latest RacerStar motors. Doesn't take too long for RacerStar, one of the Banggood brands, to release the latest size motor that's trendy. So the last motors that have been getting pretty popular are the 23 size Stator, 2306, 2305. So here's their entry into this motor class, 2306, 2400 KV. So this one's branded RacerStar BR2306S. Comes in this non-descriptive box, just a standard box. They use this box for all the motors almost now these days. And it's just a motor and 8 M3 Allen screws. The screws are M3 by 8 millimeters. If your arm is thinner than 3.6 millimeters, you might end up hitting the windings with the included screws. So make sure to check. If you have 3 millimeter arms, you may end up damaging actually the windings. So careful about that. Here's the motor. It comes with this nice aluminum prop lug nut, and it's aluminum, so it's light. So some of the features, I guess now most motors are incorporating all the latest trendy features. One piece hollow shaft. There's the same shaft on the motor. Then from the prop, then they turn it down from 5 millimeter to 4 millimeter for the motor part, and usually it's partially hollow. This one's actually hollow all the way through. So most motors are only partially hollow. They're solid through the middle portion where it goes through the bell, but this one's hollow all the way through. So interesting. That's quite interesting. I guess that'll save some grams, a couple of grams. So maybe not 2 grams, maybe half a gram or so. Who knows? Motor leads are about 70 millimeters each. So that's the motor leads. The motor shape kind of reminds me of the Emex's. It's not quite identical. This one has a higher profile than the Emex. The Emex is a lot thinner. So here's the comparison side by side. As you can see, the Emex is quite thinner. This RacerStar is much taller. It does have some things that were first seen on the Emex. For instance, the vanes for moving air through the motor are also present here. So these are supposed to circulate air. They draw air from the bottom and expel it out this way. So that's a good feature. Here's where the motor shaft it turns down from 5 millimeters to 4. So this is 4 millimeters here. The finish is a little bit rough, and the only thing I did notice here, this seems to be a little bit of a step. It seems like they turned it down too much right there. So it's 4 millimeters, and then here's probably, I can get my caliper in there, but you can feel it. It's like a groove there. So I don't know why they did that. That kind of creates a stress point there, because you're going from 4 millimeter to, let's say, 3.98, 3.97, whatever that is, and then you're going large again right here. So hopefully, and then this is hollow, so hopefully there's enough material there that it doesn't cause an issue when you when you crash, hopefully it doesn't lead to shearing off the shaft, because that's what happens when you have stress points like that. You know, it'll just shear off. It'll break off right there. But hopefully that's not the case. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. It's just something that I noticed. You can feel it when you run the flat screwdriver there. So hopefully that's not an issue. But other than that, everything else looks pretty good. It seems that there's plenty of epoxy on the magnets. There's balancing mud, balancing epoxy, the blue epoxy there. They've done dynamic balancing, it looks like. So that's good. Now they're saying on the product page, they're saying that they're using Nmb Japanese bearings. However, I don't see any markings. Usually Nmb bearings will say Nmb, so I don't see any markings there. So who knows? You know, they could be very well be made by Nmb in bulk, so they don't, you know, they're not marked. But you know, let's hope they are Nmb so that they're trouble free. It looks like they use multi-strand wire. It looks like there's possibly 3 strands per bundle. So that, you know, multi-strand. You'll see motors these days with multi-strand or single wire. Doesn't seem to be a major advantage on either method. Laminations seem to be 0.2 millimeter. That's standard for a lot of the motors these days. They're either 0.2 or 0.15. So most motors these days have all these features. So this one also has that. So they're, you know, they're, for a budget motor, it looks pretty good. So I mean, we've yet to see how it does as far as durability. You know, once you people start abusing it and crashing, then we'll see how, you know, how strong the motor is, because that's actually one of the major features that a motor could have is its durability, because, you know, as you know, we crash the our quads all the time, so we want motors that are not gonna break on just normal impacts. As far as tolerances, actually everything feels tight. The motor goes in pretty tight into the bearings, and the tolerances there on the motor is actually they look pretty good. The air gap of the between the space between the magnet, the face of the magnet, and the face of the stator, it's actually pretty tight. It's some of the tightest ones I've seen from the RacerStar motors. So you know, that should give it pretty good performance actually. So I was quite surprised to see that. Most of them have had larger gaps, and also you can see the density of the magnets. It's also pretty good. There's not much space between adjacent magnets, so they're using plenty of magnet. I think they're not. They don't seem to be curved magnets, so you know, that's where the budget part comes from probably. But it still should perform pretty well, I think, based on what I've seen here. It should have pretty decent performance, I think. We'll see when we put it through the thrust stand. Let's see what kind of numbers it gets. So let's see what it weighs. So So yeah, they're saying 33.5 on the product page. Let's see how close it gets. 32.8 right here. 32.8. So I imagine they must have waited with the prop nut. 33.6 with the prop nut. So they must have waited with this because I'm getting 32.8, which is pretty good. Pretty good weight for this motor, for this size motor. So now let's have a closer look so you guys can see a close-up of the motor. So here it is. So you can see pretty good finish. Not that rough. The machining is pretty decent, I think. I don't know if right there you can see the hollow shaft. And here's a close-up of the stator and wire. The windings are pretty decent. Not as good as the ones on premium motors. As you can see, they've bundled a lot of the wire along like the middle of each coil. Usually on really good motors you'll see the bundling, most of the bundling towards the outside of the tooth, so you get more, you don't get as much copper right next to each other. There's a lot more space between the stator arms, the stator. There's a lot more space towards the edge here, so you'll see a lot of the motors they concentrate a lot of the winding towards the outside. But right here, you know, they went through the middle like that. I don't really know if that causes any advantage or disadvantage. But just, you know, something I saw. So I don't know exactly if that has anything to do with performance. But there you go. That's a close-up of the stator. It's pretty decent. Looks pretty good. And there's the bell with the vanes for drawing air. The magnets, pretty well made, I think. Magnets are fairly thick and they look to be pretty well glued, so shouldn't have any issues of slipping magnets, I think. I can see there's a lot of glue there, and it's seems to be pretty solid. So, and no markings on the bearings. Alright, so that's the overview of the and breakdown of the motor. Let's tear down of the motor. Let's see what it can do on the thrust stand. Alright, so here are the results for the thrust test on the BR2306S
The motor measure at 2415 kV. So on the more popular props that I tested, one of them being the 5040x3, the motor's easily clearing 1300 grams of thrust at a pretty decent 34.7 amps. So that's pretty manageable once in the area. These numbers are going to be a lot less for the load for amps. In the air, the props are going to unload. So usually anywhere from 25 to 35% lower amps is what you're going to see. You got to keep in mind that the lipos are usually also the limiting factor. So the batteries are not able to deliver these many amps for four motors. There's a limit as to what they can deliver. Also, in static thrust, the air is stagnant and there's a lot of air that gets recirculated. So that adds to the drag, all the turbulent air the motor has to fight through. So that also has a lot to do in static thrust tests. So keep that in mind. All right, so as we move on to the larger props that load the motor more, we can see the Cyclone, another popular prop, the Cyclone 5046x3, still making more thrust. Amps are still pretty manageable, pretty much in line with what other motors are using. And then we go on to the 6-inch props, still making more thrust at a pretty decent current draw. It doesn't seem that the amps are getting drastically higher as we move up on the props. So that's pretty good, pretty respectable performance out of this budget motor. Now let's compare it to the premium motor, the Emax 2306, and let's see how it does against that motor. So this is an interesting comparison against the Emax 2306. It's one of the premium motors in this size class. Let's look at the 5040x3 prop, which is one of the more commonly used props. We can see pretty close performance, 1400 versus 1372. Amps are pretty close as well. Emax is drawing a little bit more. Of course, the thrust is slightly higher by about 30 more grams. So this one RacerStar showing pretty good efficiency at this for this prop. The next larger prop, the 5046 by 3, pretty close. 1498 versus 1480, 43 versus 42. So that's pretty close performance for these two motors. Let's look at the 6-inch props, and this is where the Emax is really shows what a premium motor can do. So this is where all the details come into play. It shows you that this motor has more torque uh, due to the components used on the motor, tighter air gap, distance between magnet and face of stator, quality of windings, etc., etc. So that's where it shows, So it's got more torque. Therefore it's able to spin these props at higher speeds and consequently getting higher thrust. So as you can see, pretty marked difference, about 100 grams more on the 6-inch props. And the amps, of course, are going to be higher, and you can see that not a lot higher for the extra amount of thrust. There's only about 2 more amps being used by the Emax. So this one, the RacerStar it's hit the wall basically, the torque wall. So it's getting close to the limit. So the amps are just climbing, but it's not making any more thrust. But still a pretty decent performance considering the price on this motor. So not too bad. So this is where where you decide whether you want the top motor or you just want a budget motor. One other thing that we cannot measure here is how the torque helps a motor in its responsiveness. So the idea is the more torque a motor has, the faster is going to be able to respond to pilot input. So as you move the throttle back and forth, the motor with higher torque is going to be able to bring the prop to lower RPM, and then to bring it up to higher RPM faster than a motor with lower torque. So that's where that would come into play, and the premium motor would probably have an advantage in that respect. Uh, but still a pretty good showing for this budget motor. The only thing that I still couldn't comment about is its durability. Not until people start using it and we get reports of how durable it is, then we'll know for sure. I'm sure people are gonna post soon enough how this motor does in crashes and stuff, and over time. But overall, the motor looks pretty good for the price. It should be a good option for budget builds. We'll have to keep an eye on and see how good the longevity is on this motor. All right, hope you find that useful, and thanks for watching, and until the next one.